Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian he never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election from a well-oiled...
The Ilinden holiday in remembrance has come and gone, and Macedonians are confined to staying, for the most part, in Macedonia as the coronavirus continues to take its toll on human lives, human suffering, economic hardships, and now in limiting the choices of Macedonians as to where they can travel. Though it's not a bad thing to stay and explore Macedonia. In the meantime, the jockeying for positions in the new government continue, with rumors and rumors of rumors continuing to make the rounds. One day, the rumor is that Zoran Zaev's party, SDS, has agreed to a deal with Ali Ahmeti and his party, and the next day, they deny everything. Here's an old joke. How do you know Zoran Zaev is lying? Answer, his lips are moving. By August 14, President Stevo Pendarovski must give a mandate to someone to form a new government, and after that, the individual will have 20 days to form a government. And so Macedonia waits. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin and Jason calling in from Skopje, Macedonia.
So, we took a week off with the Ilinden holidays. I think you were out in the village and hopefully enjoyed some time off. And now we're back. Of course, the elections, July 15, which seems like years ago, the way news continues these days. Zoran Zaev, who was a man in a hurry to hold elections, then immediately after the elections said he wasn't in a hurry. So he was supposed to start forming or talking about forming a government after Ilinden, so that was this past week, and as I mentioned in the opening monologue, rumors and rumors of rumors. What's the truth? What's really going on there in terms of the government formation between him and Ali Ahmeti and even Vumra?
Yeah, well, the parliament constituted. They had the first session on August 4th.
Right.
In the grand new hall built by Nikola Gruevski on top of the parliament in a domed chamber.
Yeah.
And that's apparently safer from the coronavirus or something. And it
allows light to come in, right? And light, of course, kills the coronas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope he planted an explosive device somewhere in time, and he has he can activate it by phone from Budapest. As usual, it starts, and then they got to the point where they have to elect the Speaker of Parliament, which is obviously part of the political negotiations and dealings. This position, just as it was in 2016, causing much delays in the formation of the government and the eventual storming of the parliament. So once you do not have enough votes, since there is no longer since there is no ruling coalition formed still with 61 votes, this item of the agenda was postponed, and therefore the parliament is in a limbo. Now they have 10 days since the parliament was constituted to for Pendarovski, the president, to give a mandate to somebody who he estimates or who he gets assurances from that from the candidate who claims to have 61 votes or is able to get to 61 votes in cases when there is a party with 61 votes, like Vumra used to have in the past. Oftentimes it's a no-brainer, but this time, Zoran Zaev or Mickovski need to go to Pendarovski and tell him, we have 61 votes, we have declared, pledged members, and Pendarovski gives them 20 days to form a government.
Right.
And if this fails, then he needs to give the mandate again to a different person. Probably from the next party. So if Zaev gets the first attempt, then Mickovsky should get the second. But then again, he could keep giving it. Pendarovsky could keep giving it to SDSM or to different candidates, even the same candidate. I don't think he's banned from doing this. There is some foul play. Somebody saying that Pendarovsky was still not officially notified by a letter from the parliament that the parliament is constituted. So this means the 10 days are not running yet, which means this is just a delaying tactic. SDSM may try to use if their negotiations with DUI and the other Albanian parties become very difficult. So Pendarovsky could play dumb and say, well, I didn't know that the parliament convened. I had no idea, honestly. That's why I am going to wait more than 10 days. So this would be the 14th. So he could try and postpone it for later. But this would definitely be a sign of weakness on the part of SDSM, which claims that they're able to form a government quickly. And but so far they haven't been able to do so.
So we wait.
Yeah. There is a lot of media leaks in the meantime.
Sure.
SDSM said that they have agreed the principles of a coalition, but once you read the statement with DUI, which would put them at 61, they have Menduh Taci from DPA as well, so this would put them at 62, which is enough for a government. But the press release was very carefully written not to declare that they have agreed a coalition. They just agreed the principles of a potential future coalition. So then a few days later, Zaev himself had to say, no, we do not have a deal yet. Talks are just starting. There is still much to be discussed. And Ahmeti, obviously, to improve his negotiating position, also met with Mickovsky, with the VMRO leader, and some of the principles which Ahmeti and Zaev said were agreed include accepting the Prespa Treaty, the Treaty with Bulgaria, more concessions to Albanians, blah, 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 which means that, it's possible that VMRO would not sign up to all of these items. On the other hand, Ahmeti made sure to make a point which VMRO is insisting on, that all politicians, their property will be vetted in short order to investigate if they can prove how they got everything they own, businesses, cars, apartments, etc. If they can prove that they earned the money legally. Now, there is no way in hell Zaev can prove this. So Ahmeti insisted that this is part of the principles which were listed after the Prespa Treaty, the Ohrid Treaty, and the vetting of the politicians. So Ahmeti is picking up what he wants from. So he's going to use Prespa and the Bulgarian treaty to pressure VMRO in their talks, but he's also going to use VMRO's anti-corruption policies and proposals to pressure Zaev when he's negotiating with Zaev. So he's obviously trying to make the best of his situation, having 15 seats and being able to form a government with either VMRO or SDSM, but just barely with the majority of 61, 62. And that's even if VMRO get these 2 additional Levica votes in parliament, which they would need in this situation.
Is there any talk or possibility, I suppose, of DUI not being in coalition with either SDS or VMRO, and somehow the other parties being in coalition with them? The numbers, I don't think the numbers even work on that.
No, I mean, VMRO and SDSM could form a grand coalition. We discussed this.
Yeah, there's that.
They would need more Albanians, not necessarily DUI, maybe the Alliance of Albanians or someone else. There is a huge fight in SDSM's in-house Albanian Menduh Taci, Muhammad Zakiri. He has another member of parliament who is also Albanian elected on the SDSM ticket. So they're extremely hostile to Dewey. So they would try to block this deal and think about or try to break up Dewey so that, pick and choose the Dewey members of parliament, bribe them as, as the DSM did often with in the previous parliament, bribing minority members of parliament and blackmailing members of parliament with criminal charges. So they could try and destroy Dewey. Ahmeti faces war crimes, not charges, but a interestingly timed invitation to testify at the
Has he?
war crimes
Yeah, and has he
tribunal,
gone
so,
up there to The Hague to do that yet?
he could be moved. No details on this. No, nothing new on this. He was just he said that he's being invited, but he hasn't gone there yet.
Interesting. Well, on the issue of trying to break up Dewey, and I've said this time and time again, and I'll continue to say it because it happens to be true. The Macedonia's ethnic minority Albanian parties have always been cult of personality parties, whereas SDS, Citisa, I got to drop. See, I'm trying to drop the M from there. It's Citizen, but of course they're not Macedonian, as Rantzaev himself said many months ago. So Citisa and Vumro are long-term parties. I have a deep history. Citisa as the former League of Communists of Macedonia. Vumro traces its history back to the turn of the last century. But the ethnic Albanian minority parties in Macedonia are cult of personality, and you talk about breaking up Dewey. Dewey will break up when Ali Ahmeti dies, and I'm sure he's not in good health, not only because of his smoking, but persistent rumors of Parkinson's and other things like that. So once he's dead, and that will hopefully be soon, Dewey will break up because it's built around one individual. It's not built around policies or ideals or values or anything like that. It's built around one man who is a former Marxist-Leninist and then a guerrilla, and he lost in the 1999 war in Kosovo, and so he came over and started a war in Macedonia and managed to get himself into positions of power, and he, has continued to play these games his entire life. So, but once he's dead, again, can't be soon enough, Dewey will break up. However, that's in the future. So in the here and the now, we're talking about the various possible coalitions and things like that. You just mentioned the Grand Coalition. Of course, a Grand Coalition, in my opinion, is bad, I think, if Vumro were to join, because it would be an implicit acceptance of the N-word, and I don't know how they get around that. You mentioned the press release that they put out that Dewey and, I don't know, did Dewey and Citisa put it out jointly, or was
it was like a joint.
Joint, yeah, and
they had a meeting of their Ahmetis and Zaev centerlings.
Yeah,
and they said they have an agreement on a principle basis, but then quickly denied that this means they have agreed on a coalition.
Right. But as you mentioned, they the guiding quote unquote principles, I'm using air quotes here, to uphold and respect the Prespa Agreement, the Friendship Treaty with Bulgaria, the Ohrid Framework Agreement, and then I like this part, at least on the English version I'm looking at. It says, we're committed to securing social cohesion and rule of law and condemn all forms of nationalism and hatred. Now, I don't know what that means in practice. Condemn hatred. Okay, fine, condemn hatred. But I don't know what that really means. This gets into the issue of quote-unquote hate speech, which Europe is pretty bad at. Europe doesn't actually believe in free speech. I think the only country left on the planet that enshrines free speech is the United States of America. And this, I'm going slightly afar from what we're supposed to be talking about here, but I was just watching a video with Jordan P. Peterson, the Canadian clinical psychologist who has taken the world by storm, and really detests and despises communism and believes that the world, or the West, I should say, is headed towards an authoritarian system that cracks down. And one of his big things is speech. And I'll have to find the clip. It's very good. He's and his what he says mirrors what I believe. And is there hateful speech? Well, of course. The issue is not whether or not there's hateful speech. The issue is, should the government be empowered, should a government, any government, be empowered to make a determination as to what is or is not, quote unquote, hate speech, and then to have the power to crack down on that? Because there is no objective definition of hate speech. It is subjective entirely. What might be hate speech to you may not be hate speech to me, or hateful speech. I prefer the term hateful speech. So when you empower government bureaucrats, especially unelected ones, to make that determination, and then they get to enforce it, well, you're going to shut down all debate whatsoever, because somebody out there is going to be offended by something. We see this in the world. We see this all over the world. But and this is. But going back to this Dewey press release, condemning all forms of hatred, I think that just opens the door for them, if they were to get in power again, to just really crack down, using the full force and power of the law and the government, which they would be, to crack down on free speech in Macedonia. And they would get to define it however they want. And that is not good for democracy, and that is not good for Macedonia.
Yeah, definitely. Like 10 days ago, our friend Philip Stoyanovsky and his far left, completely ludicrous Metamorphosis organization, which is modeled after the Media Matters for America organization. They have been appointed fact checker of Facebook for Macedonia, so they would get to decide who posts false news, fake news on Facebook, and presumably that's their wet dream. Ban Facebook accounts which print falsehoods in their opinion. So that's obviously that's the end game here. That's what they're going for. What the left. That's the only way the left can run this. Make this situation continue for much longer if they shut down critical voices and borrow enough money to buy the peace, and bribe enough people, because otherwise this is unsustainable. I mean, this is really not the way to run a country.
Well, Philip is. Let me engage in a little hateful speech myself. I think Philip is a tin-pot little moronic dictator who can never make it in the private sector if he ever even thought about working in the private sector, and so he's got to run NGOs and get his salary from various governments and foundations and things like that, because frankly the guy has no talent whatsoever. So anyway, back to back to the issue at hand. So I guess this week, let's see, we're recording, this is episode 82 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, and we are recording this on Sunday, August 9. I don't know what the number anniversary, let's see, 1945, dropping of the bomb on Nagasaki. Just wanted to make a point of that. Second time only ever in history that a nuclear bomb has been used. The first time was on August 6 on Hiroshima. So this will drop tomorrow, the 10th. Which
Not
means...
the bomb, but the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. This podcast will drop on...
Although, from what happened in Lebanon, I'm not really sure. I mean,
oh my
how
goodness.
is that not a nuclear device? I'm not know.
Well, I don't know. I'm not schooled in such things, but that our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Lebanon. And of course, that is really, it's exacerbated an already tenuous situation there with a shaky government to begin with. Anyway,
the Lebanon of the Balkans here.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, we're going far afield again, but Lebanon in the 60s and 70s, I believe, used to be the Paris of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And now it's just, well, anyway. But tomorrow is the 10th of August, third of the way through the month already, and it seems like it just started. And by the end of the week, as I mentioned in the monologue, Stevo Pendarovsky has to give the mandate to somebody to try and form a government. I think it's a mess, frankly. That's my own personal opinion. I think you should have new elections again. You should be like the Israelis and just keep holding elections.
Yeah. It could be very fun. I mean, it could be very amusing for Ahmeti to, give some assurances to Zaev, then send Zaev to Pendarovsky's office to receive the mandate, and then just drag it out beyond the 20 days, insist that, I don't know, Zaev will not accept a proper vetting of the businesses which he has built up or something like that, and then force him run out the clock, and then, publicly humiliate him once, show him who's boss, and then let's see what happens next. Obviously, Ahmeti has another request which he can insist on, which is to have an ethnic Albanian prime minister. And
Right.
here, as usual, we had these leaks during the negotiations. So VMRO were first out leaking that as soon as SDSM and Dewey met first, people around VMRO media outlets, they leaked, okay, they apparently have an agreement, and SDSM accepted the request. This was not entirely accurate, but it was obviously meant to make it more difficult for Zaev to make a deal with Ahmeti, because, if it's out there in the public that they're negotiating, they're close to a deal, and one of the demands is this, SDSM immediately retaliated. They had a counter leak in their media outlets saying that VMRO now have an agreement with Dewey, and that they agreed on Lazar Ilinovsky, former defense minister, who is his father is Macedonian, his mother is Albanian, and whenever there is some talk about Albanian candidate for something, we trot him out and say, okay, let's make this guy whose main claim to fame is that he's half Macedonian, half Albanian.
Half and half.
Let's make him something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really racist, really
It
ugly.
is.
And he should just say, no, thanks, I'm not interested. But he was kind of involved in some of the electioneering, so he put himself out there. So SDSM was briefing that, VMRO accepted Lazar Ilinovsky, or proposed Ilinovsky as half Albanian prime minister, and have a deal with Dewey. VMRO then quickly denied this. The other Albanian parties, they're saying, okay, we don't have the numbers. Dewey stole the vote, especially in their parts of the country like Kičevo, where they were ballot stuffing, this, which is, of course. And they say, we are encouraging Dewey to negotiate with VMRO and SDSM and fulfill their promise that they will deliver an Albanian prime minister. We might even support them. If they can negotiate this, we might join the government and vote with them and help them out. This is a big national cause. In reality, they realize that Dewey will not get this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just essentially prodding Dewey to hold firm on their promise of an Albanian prime minister. And as we discussed before, it's possible that if Dewey really hold firm on this request, that this opens the door to a grand coalition. This is used as an excuse for VMRO and SDSM to say, okay, we're not being blackmailed by these Albanians. We'll form a grand coalition and then invite some smaller Albanian parties to provide the majority of Albanian votes.
Yeah, I hope that Macedonia's ethnic Albanian citizens realize that they're being taken for fools and taken for a ride by the leadership of the ethnic Albanian parties in Macedonia. They are like, all of them, to a man and a woman, are like the far left leaders of the of black communities here in America. Basically, what Ali Ahmeti is saying to his constituency is, yeah, you need jobs, but look over here. We've got a shiny new ethnic Albanian prime minister. Albanians in Macedonia remain poor, poorly educated, and suffer from a host of other chronic problems. But the answer to all those, of course, is just to have an ethnic Albanian prime minister. That's incredibly condescending. But again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that Ali Ahmeti and the leaders of all the Macedonia's ethnic Albanian parties through the years have never had policy positions or anything else. It's just about, we have to have Albanians in positions of power, and that's it. And the people suffer. It's it's just condescending. That's all there is to it. And Macedonia is, the Albanian population in Macedonia is not well served by these people. And someday maybe there will be a leader amongst Macedonia's Albanians that comes forward and says, you know what, we're interested in creating jobs and wealth. We're interested in building schools and having good teachers. We're interested in having proper water and sanitation and all of these other basic things that everybody, regardless of their ethnicity in Macedonia, needs. And yet, that's all Ali Ahmeti can talk about in between smoking endless cigarettes.
Yeah.
I really don't like the man.
Yeah, you never hear them discuss like anything that would be mildly interesting to a person, like taxes, education, healthcare. It's just more Albanians, and this ugly posturing on, nationalist posturing, and it's really, okay, they have their moment. They think, they're in the, the favorites of the American Empire, and they got all they wanted in the Balkans, and they are going to keep pushing, and it's working for them as a nationalist project, and they're not going to stop until they're stopped. Until they run into a brick wall. Otherwise, they're going to keep pushing.
True. What is that brick wall, though?
Yeah, well, they overreach at one point.
They will. You're right. They will. They will overreach, and then there will be pushback. And I know that Macedonians are a patient people, but there's got to be some pushback at some point. Pivoting slightly over here to the American elections, it looks like, as it stands right now, it looks like Joe, where am I, Biden, will very well become the president. Of course, the Albanians, wherever they are, like him and his policies, but he doesn't even know who they are anymore. He doesn't know who anybody is anymore. Yeah. It's just, Cvetin is really getting bad here in terms of looking at our presidential election. We got two doddering old fools to choose from. One's a narcissist and one is non compos mentis. But of course, obviously, that's not the issue. The issue is one of them's going to be elected, and the people around them and the parties will have the power to implement policies. And obviously, as conservatives, this is a conservative podcast. We favor policies that will actually uplift the individual and create the greatest good for society, and we believe that those are conservative policies, not leftist policies. Let's pivot to a moment. You mentioned the American Empire there, and one of the cartoonists on Twitter, Macedonian, what's his name? Is it
Sedopera?
Yeah. He had a great cartoon of Ahmeti and Zoran Zaev. I think Zaev is kissing Ahmeti, but the hand that's around both of them has got the stars and stripes, so clearly the Americans. And this is a point I want to keep making, is that it's the U.S. Embassy and the State Department that are the real problem for Macedonia, and frankly for most countries around the world, in my opinion, and for a whole host of reasons which we've talked about in the past. But here's a great case in point. So the U.S. Embassy on August 5 puts out a tweet. It says, the Veles Basic Court announcement that former Skopje Criminal Court President Vladimir Panchovsky was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for misusing ACCMIS is a positive step forward in seeking accountability for those accused of undermining judicial independence. Okay. I had to tweet back and I said, I noticed you made no such remarks when Katica Yaneva was sentenced in June. You're all hypocrites responsible for the deteriorating relations between Macedonians and the United States government. You are responsible for what follows. Oh, and it's only and always Macedonia, of course. So, I went back through their Twitter feed. They never said anything about Katica. It's only when they think that they can get digs in at the right, and obviously to call out her sentencing would be to draw attention to the fact that the U.S. Embassy and various government officials in Washington were very supportive of her and the Special Prosecutor's Office. The other quote that I loved that was Victoria Nuland. Let's see. Let me find that one. Victoria Nuland, famous for saying the EU in a phone call. We can bleep that. This is a couple of years ago. During her visit, Nuland expressed strong support for the SJO. Its future work was, quote, vitally important to bring in true rule of law, accountability, and clean justice system to this country. So obviously the embassy has to distance itself from the arrest, the sentencing, all the ugliness surrounding the Special Prosecutor's Office and Katice Janeva, but they will select, frankly, this is what it is. For them, it's selective tweeting, I guess is the right word. It's selectively pointing out things in Macedonia that benefit the government of Macedonia, the left, and anything that would cast a shadow or shade on the U.S. Embassy for what they've done in the past. For folks they've supported in the past, obviously they're not going to draw attention to that because they are hypocrites. That's you, Kate Burns. You're a hypocrite. Okay? You need to leave. I'm getting tired of paying for your salary and having you representing the people of the United States of America in Macedonia, and the Macedonians see that and they think, well, this is America, and that serves towards the deterioration of relations between Macedonians and Americans, and that's not in America's interest to have bad relations between the two peoples and the two countries. And yet that is what you, Kate Burns, are doing. That's what all American ambassadors in Macedonia have done since the beginning. None of them have had any worth to varying degrees. I think Paul Waller's was better than others, but still, it's the official line of the State Department. Bugs the hell out of me, Cvetin.
Yeah, it's a horrible case. This is such a travesty. I mean, Vladimir, he was head of the criminal court in Skopje when Katice Janeva was launching her charges, and he was sentenced now for allegedly not using the random electronic thingy that distributes cases to random judges. And, the embassy was apparently bribing, blackmailing, buying, influencing some judges to make sure that they go ahead with Janeva's charges, and they accused Panchovsky of taking the case against, let's say, Gruevski and giving it to a judge who would be more lenient. Now, one thing now we know, and we knew then, but now we know for sure that who and what Katice Janeva was, what an idiot, what a corrupt, politicized tool of politics and of international interest she was. The cases are ludicrous, and they never should have been initiated in the first place. They only serve the purpose of removing Gruevski and imposing the name change on Macedonia.
Right.
Second of all, as president of the court, he insisted that the judges do not use wiretaps, do not admit illegally obtained warrantless wiretaps as evidence, which is a no-brainer for any court in the world. I'm not sure if he has the right to ban a judge from doing this. I think it then goes to the appeals court, and the appeal court judge can say, "What are you crazy? What have you been drinking to admit this thing as evidence?" But okay, he was outspoken in opposition to this. So he was trying to stop the travesty of Janeva's violation of the rule of law in this regard. I'm not sure about the previous case if he was actually doing this. If he were, I don't know I have not seen that the system is now suddenly working, because all the important new politicized cases always end up with Judge Dobrila Kacarska, who is 100% loyal to SDSM. So that if Panchovsky broke the randomizer, then it's definitely still broken. Except, for in favor of the other side. No response from the embassy here. And he was tried in we call it preki sud, it's left from the Serbian, like a court-martial environment. Kangaroo court would be an American version. Basically, they were still having witnesses in the morning, and they had a sentencing in the afternoon. So it was like a one-day affair.
Wow.
And it's completely ridiculous. And meanwhile, he was very outspoken. After he was removed as judge, he was first removed as president of the court, then completely removed as a judge. he was outspoken on Twitter and social media, pointing out to all the violations that the new judges are doing. Kianeva is doing in an excellent, very lucid, very eloquent way, using memes, video edits. So he was, a star on Twitter, on top of actually being proven right by later events. And that the U.S. Embassy was spiking the football now, that, or again, as we would say here, drawing out a knife at a dead German, which, was a joke about the partisans becoming heroes after the war.
Yeah.
So now they had us beaten unfairly, violating all the rules in the book, and now they're still going after people. What's this meant to prove? That there is rule of law in Macedonia? Nobody's going to buy this. I mean,
Right.
the one person who was right from the start about the violations of the rule of law, they put him in prison, and they declare that it's a victory for the, I mean, okay, this is just obviously just an introduction into what's coming in your own country.
True.
Around November, and what has been happening for the past 4 years. This is how this group of idiots intend to rule the world. They cannot do it on the battlefield. They cannot do it in the business sphere. They just want to do this by lawfare, by trumped up charges, rigged courts and prosecutors.
True.
And it's completely humiliating, and it's just a taste of what's coming your own way.
Yes, well, you're absolutely right, and I guess in that regard, we're kind of like prophets on our own country. But of course, a prophet in his own country is always rejected. So, but let's try and look at something positive, and that is that there's a lot of people in both the United States of America and in the Republic of Macedonia who do not want any of this, and right now they're very quiet. It is the silent majority, if you will, and I firmly believe that. And the question is, how do you awaken the sleeping giant, the silent majority? We've seen instances of it over here, of course. Most recently, the lawsuit by one of the New York government attorneys against the National Rifle Association in an attempt to break it up. Not just if they're a nonprofit 501c3, which we don't need to get into the details on that, and there's questions about malfeasance within the leadership and whatnot. Okay, fine. Take them to court, do whatever you need to do with them, but you can't break up a voluntary nonprofit organization that millions and millions of Americans have decided to join and be a part of. So anyway, my point in saying that was that I think that as a tactical move from the left, the side of the leftist side, doing that, less than 3 months before the election is not a smart move. So I'm not sure why they're doing that. But anyway, it speaks to the silent majority. And over here, gun owners and NRA members vote, and they get their friends and families out to vote. Whereas those who are opposed to guns, for them it's not as big of an issue, and it's not as motivating of an issue. So what is, so then pivoting back over to Macedonia, what is the thing, the issue, maybe two issues or something that we need to do to motivate the silent majority to come out and raise their voice and, for lack of a better word, overthrow the corrupt system that is in Macedonia now, whether it is the government or the foreign embassies or the EU, or even, NATO operations and things like that. And when I say overthrow, I don't mean for the NSA and others that are listening in on this and that will listen to this. I don't mean violently or through a revolution, because the revolution always devours its own. But in what ways can we, the silent majority, fight back? And what is that one or two issues, Cvetin, in Macedonia that's going to motivate them to stand up and start speaking?
Well, money is running out. Money is going to run out. They're still propping up businesses with the corona money which they borrowed, but that's not going to last much longer. Electricity price hike was a big deal. They timed this just after the election, so through the election, SDSM is campaigning on this stupid subsidized electricity for 2 hours a day, so everybody times their laundry and turning on the heater for the water. at that moment, those 2 hours. And as soon as the elections are over, surprise, increase of 7.4% in electricity prices.
Wow.
So it will be, I mean, if the economic downturn occurs and is felt, then it's going to be something. Then something shows up. I mean, usually the environment gets worse, and then people just decide what to get upset about, and it might be a stupid thing like during Gruevski, just an additional test for high school students, and suddenly everybody is up in arms. And but it was something else. It was, it was not this issue. In hindsight, it's usually some stupid issue, but the mood changes now. It's no point predicting what that's going to be. It's just it might be an incident with Albanians, another humiliation of Macedonians by Greeks or somebody else in the neighborhood. Who knows? I mean, there was a saying here similar to the silent majority. People used to say that like the Sultan would send out spies across the country and to report what they're saying, and they would come and say that the people are grumbling about this or that, and then sometimes they would happily report they're quiet, they're not saying anything, and then the wise Sultan, if he was a wise one, he would say, now they're dangerous. If they're quiet, then there is trouble brewing. This is our version of the silent majority comment. But I mean, we would have seen it if the elections were held in normal terms, like September, normal turnout. Now the corona numbers are slightly not down, but people are kind of getting used to the whole situation. So more would have voted. The embassy insisted strongly that the elections are held as soon as possible. We needed urgently a government, and clearly knowing that this will reduce turnout, and once the turnout is down by 200,000 people, then it is within the distance of fraud. It's this is DSM could have bought enough voters to rig an 800,000 voters election. They could not have bought enough people to rig a 1 million voters turnout election. So this is what the embassy did. This is how the elections were mostly rigged, by choosing the date of elections. And the silent majority remained silent. Now, will this mean, people just waiting for the corona to end and continue to move out? And I mean, we destroyed a country which we didn't like once. It was not by revolution, it was by sabotage. We impoverished it. The businesses were inefficient, the economy was tanking, collapsing. This is how we destroyed Yugoslavia by just refusing to cooperate with it. And if nothing else happens, if we are sedated under a grand coalition scheme or even under a technical or DSM-led government, people will just, move out, and those who are on the public dole will keep taking it to doing nothing. School teachers are flat out saying it here like there. We don't want to go to work. You just pay us and we stay at home. How's that going to work out for you?
Exactly.
So this is the approach. This is how we're going to weaken it and.
I'm a pain dealer, I'm a faith healer,
And welcome back to the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, episode 82, I think.
82.
This is Cvetin in Skopje and Jason Miko in Tucson. And I think we've dished out enough of the politics and all the depressing stuff, and maybe we can end up on a light note.
Yes.
Which Jason is usually in charge of.
All right. Well, I've got a farmer's pick. Actually, I'll have a farmer's pick for the next 3 episodes. And this is a video, we'll have a link to it, by a young Macedonian man who is using a drone to make beautiful little videos, and he has music in there of some of the just real beautiful spots of Macedonia. And this first one that we're going to put up is TRESONČE, a little village in western Macedonia. According to Wikipedia, the population is 8. I think it's a little larger than that. But it's a 3.5 minute video. His organization, or what he's calling his group on the YouTube channel, is called Macedonia from Above. And it's just, and I've been to TRESONČE, spent a little time there, and just a gorgeous little village, peaceful. Anyway, we'll put that video up there. That's my farmer's pick, a beautiful part of Macedonia that I'll bet a lot of Macedonians haven't even visited it. And since they can't go anywhere this summer, it's time to explore. Here's my message to my Macedonian family and friends. Since you can't go to to Aegean Macedonia or other places, go and explore Macedonia and start in TRESONČE. Just for a day trip, or something like that. So anyway, that is my farmer's pick for this week.
Okay, sounds interesting. We're gonna have this in the show notes.
Yes.
And it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Haven't been there in a while.
Yeah. Good. And you still got to go to Kratovo.
again.
So.
yeah, it's on my bucket list.
Good. All right.
Some bucket.
Well, I think that's a full wrap for this week.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be back next week. No more delays. No more. We may even have a government by then.
Hey, well, yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, just something to keep us entertained.
Indeed.
I guess.
All right.
Okay, buddy.
Yep. Good talking
Till
to you.
next week. Take care.
You too.